Buenos días con todos. Bienvenido a nuestra conferencia magistral, El espacio, la frontera final, volver a la Luna. El día de hoy nos encontramos con la presencia en esta mesa de notables personalidades. Primero, la presencia del doctor Jorge Herot, profesor de nuestra universidad y quien ha sido el director del Instituto de Radioastronomía de nuestra universidad. Encontramos también con el profesor Ben Malphrus de Morehead State University, quien es una de las principales personas que nos visitan justamente el día de hoy. Tenemos también la presencia del doctor Aldo Panfichi, que es vicerrector de investigación de nuestra casa, y por supuesto Jack Fischer, astronauta de la NASA y vicepresidente de Intuitive Machines. Vamos a comenzar esta mañana con unas palabras del doctor Aldo Panfichi, dando la bienvenida a todos los presentes.
Muy buenos días, estimados Jack, Ben, Jorge, Jason, estimados estudiantes, amigos, todos, profesores, estudiantes, amigos, todos. Nos encontramos en esta mañana para presenciar un acto, un evento que para nosotros consideramos histórico. Histórico para nosotros como país, porque la investigación y el desarrollo de la humanidad en su conquista o en su desarrollo en el espacio, la Luna, el espacio profundo, etcétera, son nuevas fronteras del conocimiento, nuevas fronteras de la vida que nos cambian completamente la perspectiva de la humanidad. Estamos ante un momento histórico, un ciclo diferente en que se aperturan cosas que hoy no podemos percibir, no podemos todavía vislumbrar. Y por ello es muy importante para nosotros como universidad, como país, desarrollar programas, convenios, alianzas institucionales con aquellas instituciones como Intuitive Machines o la NASA o Morehead State University y otras universidades en el mundo con los cuales nosotros podamos aprender, podamos construir capacidades tecnológicas, humanas, para estar en este nuevo ciclo de la historia de la humanidad. Por eso considero que esto para la PUC y para el Perú es un momento de tremenda importancia, una gran oportunidad. Para mí es muy reconfortante, como vicerrector de investigación, que este auditorio esté lleno y que este auditorio esté lleno con jóvenes, con ustedes, con estudiantes, hombres y mujeres, que son el futuro del país y, ¿por qué no?, el futuro de la humanidad, con sus pares en otras partes del mundo. Son ustedes los que probablemente van a ver mejor que nosotros, que nuestras generaciones, estos logros y estos avances. Pero hay que hacerlo con rigor, hay que estudiar fuerte, hay que investigar. Las cosas no vienen fáciles, hay que esforzarse. Es una responsabilidad de ustedes, de sus familias y del país. Aprovechemos esta enorme oportunidad gracias a los amigos que nos visitan y que hoy comparten sus generosos conocimientos con nosotros. Que este evento nos abra las mentes y nos abra las perspectivas y sea un compromiso para todos nosotros. En nombre de la Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú, de la cual me honro ser vicerrector de investigación, le doy la bienvenida a todos ustedes y muchas gracias a los amigos que nos acompañan. Hago una pequeña discreción. También quería agradecer al profesor Jorge Herot, que se encuentra presente, por ser visionario, por ser el primero que el 2004 con Ben empezaron a pensar en este proyecto que 20 años después o 19 años después parece que por fin estamos llevando adelante. Muchas gracias, Jorge.
Como seguramente saben, en el mundo estamos en una nueva carrera espacial. Nuevamente, las instituciones espaciales del mundo desean poner nuevamente al hombre a la Luna. De hecho, NASA lidera estos esfuerzos. Y esta es una oportunidad para que el Perú sea justamente partícipe de este proyecto. El día de hoy justamente contamos con la presencia de estas personas que nos van a justamente comentar cómo es que nosotros, los peruanos, vamos a poder participar de este proyecto. Pero les comento algo. En los 60s, el Perú también participó de los proyectos de la Luna. El Instituto Geofísico del Perú, como saben, cuenta con el radioobservatorio de Jicamarca. Y una importante medición que realizó el Perú en esos años fue justamente la medición del albedo de la Luna. Es decir, cuán suave iba a ser el terreno, la superficie lunar, para que las naves espaciales pudieran aterrizar. Las mediciones que hizo Jicamarca en ese momento, el Perú, el Instituto Geofísico del Perú, fueron cruciales para que el hombre pudiera poner su primer pie en la Luna. Es ahora, 60 años después, que nuevamente nosotros, los peruanos, podremos ser parte del regreso del hombre a la Luna y seguramente Jack y Ben nos contarán cómo va a ser esto posible. La primera presentación del día de hoy está a cargo de Jack Fischer. Permítame presentarlo. Jack Fischer es coronel retirado de la NASA, es líder experimentado en operaciones espaciales, piloto de combate, astronauta y experto de pruebas de vuelo con 27 años de experiencia en todo el espectro de niveles de operaciones. Es un graduado distinguido de la Academia de la Fuerza Aérea de los Estados Unidos y un becario Draper del Massachusetts Institute of Technology, del MIT, con los grados de licenciatura y maestría en astronáutica. También es un astronauta comandante y piloto de la NASA con más de 3.000 horas de vuelo en más de 40 aeronaves y un miembro asociado de la Sociedad de Pilotos de Pruebas Experimentales de los Estados Unidos. Tiene 136 días en el espacio con 2 caminatas espaciales y actualmente es el vicepresidente de producción y operaciones de Intuitive Machines. Démosle la bienvenida a Jack con un aplauso.
Good morning. Hello? There we go. All of you come in and sit down. Sit down.
Yes, over here.
Okay, put on your headphones. I apologize, my Spanish is not good enough, so I will speak in English, but we have a translator to help. So let's practice if the translating works. If you think space is cool, applaud. It works. Okay, I will have 2 parts of the presentation. First off is just for fun. I will go through a video from my space mission, and while I'm talking, the video will be playing, so it goes pretty fast. So it might not be possible to translate. Don't worry. Just enjoy the pictures. It'll be fun. The whole point of that video is just another example of how you can do amazing things when you work together as one team. I will try Spanish. Un equipo juntos. Once we've done that, I will borrow a Peruvian folktale, The Fox and the Moon, and we will explain the project that we hope to do here with the Sakaya dish. Sound good? Yeah. All right. Let's see if we can play this video. Okay. So, I went to space with expeditions 51 and 52 with the Russians. So I can speak Russian. The big green part of the rocket is the part that makes the smoke and fire, and the little white end is where we sit. That can take us away from the rocket in case there's any problems. They drive the rocket out to the launch site on a train and then rotate it into position. With only a few centimeters of room, it rotates into position. It's amazing. And while that is getting ready, so are we. We do all sorts of strange training to make sure that we don't get sick when we get to space. We have lots of traditions. This is at Red Square, honoring heroes of the past, and Yuri Gagarin's office in Star City. We all sign a register of the people who have flown to space. When we're in Kazakhstan, in Baikonur, we sign the door of the room that we stay in during quarantine, and then we walk out to some really bad Russian techno disco music and put on our spacesuit. It's a very strange room. It's like a fishbowl. And so we do a little press conference, and then we say goodbye to our family, and my lovely bride is right there. Then we go out to borrow their rocket. And if you'll notice, the rocket that was green is now white because the fuel is so cold that it makes a layer of frost on the rocket. But even though it's cold, it makes fire pretty good. And it takes 8.5 minutes for us to get to orbit, and we use a really technical device called a stuffed animal on a string, and when it floats, you're in space. We use a few other slightly more complicated pieces of technology, and we'll find the space station. It takes about 6 hours for us to dock, and then we equalize the pressure and come on board. And you'll notice I'm new at it, so I'm not very good at flying, and I come in and hug Peggy upside down. It's very ungraceful. And then Fyodor, who has flown 5 times, comes in perfectly for the picture. But it was wonderful, and my wife asked me what I thought. We'll see if we can hear.
But it's a burrito of awesomeness smothered in awesome sauce, baby. It's so beautiful.
So that might not translate well, but it's really cool. So when we, right after we showed up, there are a lot of cargo vehicles that come to the space station. The John Glenn, a orbital Cygnus, came, and it carries all sorts of supplies. What's unique about this vehicle compared to the other vehicles is that it can undock and fly around for a couple weeks doing experiments, one of which was looking at re-entry. And so I thought this looked like a spaceship, and I had to spin it around like a spaceship. But it was the first real example for me of this teamwork on space.
Just to say a few words about OA7 and the SS John Glenn. In this release and the entire mission, it performed beautifully, a fitting testament to the legendary explorer and patriot whose name it bears. The performance is also a testament to the team that supported it throughout the mission. Every detail, from the flawless system operations to the perfectly labeled straps, to a well-orchestrated symphony of cargo and science logistics. We can't say enough about the team we have the privilege to represent here on orbit, and want to send our best wishes on the final phase of its mission. Godspeed and fair winds, SS John Glenn. It has been an honor.
So the very next day, a SpaceX vehicle showed up, and at this point, it was just me and Peggy and Fyodor on the station. It was the first time that only 2 people on the US segment captured a vehicle, docked it, unloaded all of the science, did all of the science, reloaded it, and sent it back home. Just 2 people. And that was a progression of how much better we're getting at doing science on the space station. And this was 5-6 years ago, so they're even better now. Just a couple months later, another SpaceX showed up, and I think we might have had Peruvian coffee that morning because we were moving fast. So when a vehicle docks, you make sure that the pressurization is good, that the bolts are connected well, then you open the hatch, you take out some equipment, you put on some protective gear, and then you go inside and start unloading it. And it's really fun because no matter how heavy these things are, you can throw a big multi-hundred, kilogram piece of cargo at your buddy and they can catch it. And you're very motivated because there's ice cream at the bottom. Ice cream is a big deal in space. Since Fyodor was alone on the Russian segment, I was also checked out in all of their vehicles, and Fyodor and I had 2 Progress that came and went while we were on board. Altogether, there was about 25,000 pounds of cargo during our mission or while I was on board, and that's everything. That's your new underwear, that's your toothpaste, that's your clothes, but most importantly, it's the science. That's why the space station exists, is to progress science for all humans. This was a biophysics laboratory, and you'll see that each one is in a small container. Right next door is a very interesting one that looked at combustion. And here on Earth, convection, hot air rises, makes the shape of the flame that we all know. In space, there is no convection. It just lights, it burns all of the oxygen around that fuel out, and then it puts itself out. So understanding how that works makes more efficient combustion here on Earth and helps us for future systems. The ELF is so cool. It was floating a little ball that was metal with magnets, shooting it with the laser beam, and because there's no convection, it solidified uniformly, making lighter and stronger alloys than we can do here on Earth. Lyophilization is just a fun word, but it also means that we use the vacuum of space to freeze dry different medicines for long transports. We use the glove box that Peggy sent to keep us safe from our experiments, and our experiments safe from our contamination. We do lots of experiments that way. We work with robots a lot. These are little robots that kids from around the world programmed and did logic competitions. This was an interesting device. Once that pump is primed, it uses capillary action to pull a fluid across a sorbent bed and take out all the carbon dioxide. No moving parts. Pretty amazing. My youngest daughter had cancer, so this one was special to me, and I called it the cancer-seeking missile. It was a special drug that would target cancerous tissue and the antibodies within it for lung cancer, and it would leave the healthy tissue alone. So it was like a smart weapon for cancer, and that is in clinical trials with humans today. I mentioned robots. If you ever go to Japan, everyone bows. So I didn't want to make the robot mad, so I bowed to the robot. In the Japanese module, there is also a small airlock that we can put experiments in. You'll see me here loading some small satellite launchers. We put it on the slide tray. It slides out that airlock. We grab it with a robotic arm, point it below the station, and in a little less than 2 weeks, we launched about 20 satellites. Small from typically universities, and that's something PUCP should definitely try to do. We also do lots of experiments with small schools around, including my high school, where I graduated from high school in Colorado, had a small experiment up there while I was there. Vegetation is very important to spaceflight. We have figured out through different fertilization and lighting techniques that we can grow something like that in a week. It's very impressive. We also need to have everything smaller, this little box can actually sequence DNA. We did the first sequence of a random sample while we were on board, Peggy and I did. This is a rollout solar array, the ROSA. So it starts like a burrito and it rolls out to a solar array. We couldn't get it to roll back in though, so we just let it go. It burned up. While you're up there, you have to work out a lot. About 2 or 2.5 hours a day, or your bones and muscles will atrophy and degrade. So this is our treadmill, and I'm actually on the wall using these bungee cords to keep me on the treadmill and get that impact for the bones. This is like a really fancy workout machine called the A-Red. We can do like 30 different exercises, and you see how it's anchored like at a scissor point. That's so we're not imparting any loads on the space station. That's something we learned early on, not a good idea. This is our little bicycle. You see it doesn't need a seat even. You just clip into the little pedals and you pedal your hardest. We have to make sure that that is working. So we put this little template on our leg, and then we do ultrasounds of the muscles to make sure that our working out is actually useful. In space, because you don't have gravity pulling the blood down, it can increase the pressure in your head and it can deform the back of your eye. So we do a lot of experiments to try to understand who that's going to affect and who it won't. The good news is, you know that nasty blue stuff when you do an ultrasound that they have, the jelly? You don't have to use that in space. Water just sticks to your face. So you use water. All right, so spacewalks. This is the coolest thing you do in space, and I was lucky enough to do 2 of those. Once you get in your spacesuit, that first step is kind of a doozy. But once you get used to it and you appreciate the beauty around you, just the size of the space station is amazing. You have to look very hard, but there's little Peggy Whitson. See her little legs kicking? That's how big it is. It's like a football field, and world soccer football field, not little American football field. I also did a second spacewalk. We had a broken computer that we had to go and fix, and while we were outside, I installed some antennas. My buddy Tomas waved at me from inside, so I had to wave back. That's just polite. And then went back to work. But when you're outside, it's a real team effort. Again, one team, un equipo. It's like when you're in a beautiful place and you're in your hotel room, it's beautiful, but when you go outside, there's nothing in between you, and it made me fall in love. I started taking a lot of pictures that are good for science. So that was the Sahara Desert. This is the iceberg in Patagonia, Mount St. Helens in the United States. This is Mount Etna in Italy. All of these pictures allow us to learn something about the Earth, but they're also beautiful or terrifying in their own way. I was on the station when there was a large eclipse pass that went through the United States. When we captured that picture, this is beach sedimentation, erosion in a lake up in Canada. This is irrigation in Salt Lake City, all of which we can get data from, and also beauty. Algae blooms in Turkey, an algae bloom off the coast of Hawaii. The Red Sea. It didn't look too red. It was beautiful though. The currents in the water are another thing, and water is something special from orbit because you look down and it might be the Bahamas where it looks like someone threw a neon light in the water. It just glows from space. But as you're flying, you see the water. A few seconds later, the reflection of the light lets you see the currents, and a few seconds later, it reflects. And if you see it at a very low angle early in the morning, it looks like it's on fire. We get data from that. That was after a large flood in India, and it really helped understand where the damage was for the researchers on the ground. But some of these pictures are just cool. They change the way you look at the world. The sun, it took 7 seconds to go from nothing to a full disk. So if you want to get a sunrise picture, you have to be on your game. And it was amazing. If you succeed, all the layers, the blues and the reds and the pinks. The Earth is round, by the way. I didn't doctor that photo. Anytime that you can incorporate the space station, I love those pictures of the beauty of what humans created, but also the beauty of the Earth beneath. The things that you already know, you see them in a totally different way. And nighttime, boy, it would blow you away. The number of stars, and just, especially when you look at the Earth. So this is going over the United States down to South America. The lightning, and there's no borders, there's nothing. It's one Earth that's almost talking to you with the heartbeat of those lightning bolts. And boy, oh boy, if you see the aurora, it's alive. It's greens and whites and purples that jump up and grab you. If you look out the back of the station and let your eyes adjust, you can see the full disk of the Milky Way. I did a time lapse so you could see it rotate as we went around the Earth. It's amazing. And it's part of our job to share that with the world. So we did our first 4K downlink, and they asked me what my favorite movie was. We'll see if we can hear it. Oh, for me, it was definitely The Right Stuff. As a test pilot who, Edwards was my second home. You know the start where he's like flying through the clouds, and he's talking about there's a demon that lives on the meter. And then the plane crashes, it explodes, it goes to color. That's just so awesome. And then also Spaceballs, because we're basically flying at ludicrous speed right now. You have to watch Spaceballs if you haven't watched Spaceballs. So I'll just say that. So you might have learned from listening to me, I kind of like to have fun. And I was floating, so I had lots of fun. You have to take care of yourself. You get your hair cut and you suck up the little hair that floats away. You have to clean your room, just like on Earth. You have to go to the bathroom. So the can is for number 2. The hose is for number 1. I'll let you figure that out. We watched movies on Friday nights on the ceiling, strapped in like little spiders in a web. You have to play with kid toys because they're even cooler in space. Celebrate your favorite holidays. So it was 4th of July, and Peggy and I were all sorts of crazy. It was my 20th anniversary, so I married my wife again from orbit. 2 days ago was our 26th. We had the Velcro ruins your socks, so I figured I'd take a picture of it. And this was a very special moment. We had cancer children from 9 countries and astronauts in all those countries. They had actually painted those triangles. We sewed a spacesuit out of it, and it was a special moment. This is the best way to drink coffee in floaty ball form. And food, it might look disgusting, but it was floating, so it was good. If you ever get the chance to put a bunch of pudding on a spoon and then eat it, you should. And if you don't get it all in your mouth, go back and finish the job. So, even a boring little quesadilla, if it's floating, it's still awesome. You have to play with physics because they just work. My nickname is Two Fish, and so I had to go floating with the fishes, swimming with the fishes, and after that, it's about 5 or 6 months, and it's time for another crew to have their chance. So we got in our capsule, closed it up, and headed home. It's about 4.5 hours to get back to Earth. And you look outside and it's black, and then it's kind of gray, and then maybe orange, and then you see fire. And that's kind of scary. And then it coats over with a crust that pops off when the chute comes out. And it's about a 15-minute ride under the parachute for a very soft landing. And it wasn't soft. Not at all. It's Russian, so it works, but not soft. No problem, though. The Russian rescue forces were there in about 5 minutes. They take care of the parachute. They roll the vehicle so that they can pull you out. All that working out, you're in good shape, but your equilibrium doesn't work. So instead of walking around like a drunk sailor, they carry you and put you in a chair in the desert for another press conference. And you get to call home and say, hello, honey, I'm home. And then we fill ourselves full of fluid because the body doesn't need as much in an orbit, so we get an IV. And then we do another tradition at the airport, which I like to call rocking the really cool purple hat and gown. You'll see. We look good. Come on. We rock that, right? So I was on orbit with amazing people. First a crew of 5, then of 3, and then of 6. But we were only the lucky few that were at the end of the line for thousands of people around the world that made it possible. So that's what really underscores what you can do when you work together as one team. Un equipo juntos. Okay, now I'll tell you a little bit about the project that we are proposing, and then my good friends Jason Soloff and Ben Malphrus will be giving another presentation on the moon program overall, our place in it, and some of the technology. They're smarter than me, so they'll tell you more stuff. This is has anybody heard of this folktale? Not many have. The Fox and the Moon. It's Peruvian. You don't know it? All right. Well, there's a fox, and he gets his buddy the mole, and he goes, we need to go to the moon. The mole, he just wants some worms. So the fox tells him, there's worms up there. Let's go get them. So they make a big rope out of grass, and they wait till the moon is a crescent, and they're going to throw up the rope and hook it and climb to the moon. Well, they couldn't throw that high. So they went and they found a bear. And they told the bear, please climb to the highest tree and you can hook the rope. He couldn't do it. And then they gave it to a llama. And they said, you are the best at climbing the highest mountain. Will you climb the mountain for us and hook the rope? He couldn't do it. And so then they found the condor. Well, the condor is like, no problem. So he hooks it. And they climb up. The mole actually fell. Don't worry about it. The fox got there. And the fox got there because he had the right partner. And that is what we are trying to do with Peru. Not just the dish, but the people, to include this incredible university. I'm going to start with a small video. Does everybody know who John F. Kennedy is? He was a great president in our country, and he had a speech that really kicked off our space program. We're trying to rekindle that in our company, getting to the moon in a very different way. So let's listen to this, and then we'll continue. Oh, shoot. Next slide. This is all the people that are playing a part of this team. So Intuitive Machines is Jason and I's company. Dr. Malphrus is at Morehead State University. Obviously, PUCP. INROS with Marco and his team. Canida, IGP, I think I saw Edmundo up in the crowd, and then JPL helping design it. So now let's look at that video.
Retro, go. Fido, go. Guide, go. Control.
This city of Houston,
Go. Jinsey.
this state of Texas,
Surgeon, go.
this country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them.
At Intuitive Machines, we are mechanics.
This generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it.
Committed to President Kennedy's long-dormant challenge.
We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won. And they must be won and used for the progress of all people.
From how we build, test, and deliver our designs, we are redefining traditional aerospace.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
With 3 missions to the moon over the next 2 years, we have pushed innovation at every step, creating in-house technology to solve intractable problems. From software to avionics, advanced manufacturing, guidance navigation and control, precision landing system, complete propulsion system, and more.
Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Once assembled, this lander is directed from a state-of-the-art control room by a world-class team through an operational, worldwide lunar distance network. We look forward from our Houston home with hope.
This is our home, a place we're surrounded by family and friends and people of true grit. Whether it's a flood, a pandemic, or a challenge of going to the moon, Space City doesn't back down from a challenge.
We've created a family of spacecraft and collection of technology that can write our shared future. Daring greatly.
We know it will be a good flight.
In the arena to conquer the unknown.
All right. So, oh boy. There we go. Intuitive Machines. Just to give you a background on one player, and that's our company. We were founded in 2013, so not very old. And then about 2018, NASA decided to do a public-private partnership with companies to get to the moon cheaply. It was called the Commercial Lunar Payload Service Program. And why it was unique is because it was firm fixed price. In the United States, at least, it is very common for research and development programs for us to only, not to put the risk on the contractor, so it's called cost plus, and you do all your cost plus a profit. Firm fixed price means we'll give you a price, and if we don't make it, we go out of business. So what that means is you're very motivated to be creative and come up with new solutions for solving the problem. And that's what we've done. Since that time, we have won 3 of the 7 missions in CLIPS, so about half of all of them out of the 14 companies that have bid. We went public as a company on the NASDAQ this year in February. And it says 250, we're going to be probably about 500 people by the end of the year. The technology that we have and that we build almost exclusively in-house is a LOX methane propulsion system. It's the only LOX methane or cryogenic system in space to ignite and run. That allows us to get to the moon in 4 days when our competitors take 4 months. We have advanced navigation systems. We are building a small hopper for extreme mobility. So on our second mission when we land, a hopper will hop off that, go into a permanently shadowed crater, and look for water ice. We do orbital services. We have a design for nuclear reactors on the moon and are one of 2 teams that are working that for NASA. And then obviously lunar communications that we'll talk more about with Sakaya. I won't spend much time on this because Jason and Ben will look very deeply as to what the lunar economy holds. But just to put it in perspective, just the United States between now and about 2027 or 8 has $90 billion going towards lunar exploration. That is the commercial landers like we're building. We are also on a team with Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Michelin Tires, and others to build a lunar terrain vehicle. The Lunar Data Services is what Sakaya would be a part of, power services, and then crewed missions where a lot of the big money is. And I apologize, the fonts didn't quite work, but it's English anyway. She'll translate. This is a state-of-the-art communications system that we have created. It is the first lunar distance commercial network in the world, and it already works. So our other 6 sites and 7 dishes use our avionics underneath them, and we have validated all of those with the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter to include sending commands. And we've also tracked the Artemis vehicle during the Artemis 1 flight and done advanced orbit determination with our system. It is flexible, a common standard, robust security throughout, and we believe it is the perfect place to put a dish right in South America. The network itself includes our operations center. We have 1 operational and 2 more opening in September. The dishes around the world, and we'll take a closer look at those. And then our second mission to the moon, we are launching a communication relay satellite, and then every mission thereafter to put up 6 satellites in a network around the moon to provide navigation, communication, and data resources for anyone who goes. Lots of security. We've tried to layer in the security to keep it safe and secure and make anyone not worry about their data getting lost or compromised. Just to blow up that map, we have dishes around the world. Goonhilly in the United Kingdom, Artebistok in South Africa, Okinawa, Japan. We have 2 dishes, Parks, a 64-meter dish, very large, and then Mapra, and then Ben's dish in Morehead, Kentucky, all in our network. You'll notice what you want to try to do is have dishes about every 120 degrees around the Earth and in both hemispheres so that you have complete coverage. And you'll notice there's a big hole right over Peru. The Sakaya dish is so large and in such great condition that it can cover that entire region for us. It is truly a magnificent dish. The dish itself is in an ideal location. It's in fantastic condition for us to upgrade it to multiple bands so that it can support anyone. And it would be, with that upgrade, a world-class asset. And I would claim the most capable dish in South America. It would be truly amazing. In addition to the dish, though, it's the people. Dr. Malphrus has had a long relationship with many folks, including those seated with us today. Jorge Herrad is a longtime friend. Edmundo with the IGP. These are partners that can leverage the power of the people of Peru, not just a dish. Because no matter what dish you have to have people who can run it and maintain it and upgrade it. And that's what this team allows us to do and create a truly exceptional capability for the world. As far as us, Intuitive Machines and CACI as partners, we can bring global customers to make sure that that dish is used all the time. Let's see. I'll leave with this. The speech that John F. Kennedy gave talked about doing things not because they're easy, but because they're hard, of course. What's important to remember is that it's goals like that. It's impossible things that bring the very best out of us. When he says that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, that is this little spark that only incredible things can light inside the human soul. And a human soul ignited is the most powerful force on the planet. We want to do that. This is a very challenging project, very ambitious goals that we feel can really ignite a program and an entire culture within Peru that wants to be engaged in space and can be, either by working with the dish or through the partnerships that we build. And that's what we're here to do. I will leave with that, and I'll answer any questions you have. I think we still have a few minutes. Anybody brave enough to ask a question? Yes, sir. Anyone can. So there are a couple ways to do that. When I grew up, you had to go to NASA or ESA or Russia or the Soviet Union, and you had to fly with those programs. That's not the case anymore. My friend Peggy Whitson just got back from space. She flew with a private company. She flew with 2 Saudi astronauts and a fiber optics businessman. They stayed on the station for 8 days. That was the second private astronaut mission. In addition, there's private opportunities, and while they're expensive now, we're changing the economics of space, and we're allowing, because those economics are changing, more people can be a part. You see that in the last European ESA application and the last NASA one, they've opened it up quite a bit. So that's a long answer to a short question, but yes. Yes, sir. You ready for this? I'm sorry. Pooping. It's really hard because you can't train for it. Space, we have a lot of great training. That's one you just can't practice, and it gets messy. So there you go, pooping. Yes, sir. So the question was, and I should repeat those questions. When I said pooping, he asked what was the hardest thing in space. So there you go. He's asking the sensation from the Soyuz engines and then coming home. So the rocket that I went up on was very smooth. And when I was flying, I would, has anyone ever seen Top Gun? So you know where it's this nice, gentle music, and then he salutes the crew chief, and then it's danger zone, right? So I always enjoyed that moment. I'd salute the crew chief, and then I'd go to work. In my space mission, you're really busy going uphill, so I enjoyed the moment when the engines lit, and then I was focused on the mission. So it wasn't the folks like Peggy who have flown multiple vehicles. It's much smoother than the space shuttle was because it doesn't have solid rockets. But it was a good acceleration, and it was constant for 8.5 minutes. Coming home, awful. It's awful. You teach your equilibrium, you don't trust it anymore. Your vestibular, you just shut it off. And it doesn't work because you're floating. But then you start coming back into gravity, it starts working again and sending you signals. You're not used to it. The parachute comes out, you're bouncing all around, and then you hit the ground. Oh my Lord, when you hit the ground, it does not feel good. So I did okay. I think Fyodor and Peggy were not feeling too good when we landed. All right, one more question. What do you got?
There will be any chance in the future to go to space traveling, but in the cheapest way, because we know today is very expensive. But I would like you if you could tell me if it will be possible.
Well, the question was if there's a way to go to space. It is very expensive. I agree. If you win the lottery, one of those ways is very good. I would recommend Peru. Build a program that matters in the world. Marco is coming from the largest of its kind radars in the world. Peru, if you don't know, has some amazing capabilities. It's time to grow those and to make sure the world knows so that Peru can play a part in the future of humanity in space, and go as a Peruvian. All right, so we have Ben and Jason's talk as well. I would ask a favor. It's my 26th anniversary for me and my wife. That was yesterday or 2 days ago, and I was at Sakaya with Marco. He's not as good looking. And so I made a promise to take her to Machu Picchu. So I got to go to Cusco. And I would love to take a selfie. I'll stand in the corner and get everybody in it so I can post that. Is that okay if I post that on my social media? Okay.
Bueno, agradezcamos nuevamente a Jack. Jack se va a conocer Machu Picchu. Y ahora le damos la bienvenida a Jason Soloff en la mesa. Él va a continuar con las presentaciones junto con el doctor Ben Malphrus. Pero para presentarlos voy a invitar al profesor Jorge Roth para que haga las presentaciones del caso.
Buenos días con todos. Espero que me permitan decirle unas cuantas palabras en inglés para saludar con cortesía a nuestros invitados. I just wanted to say a few words to welcome Ben Malphrus and Jason Soloff. It's a pleasure to have you here. And for me, I'm sure also for Ben, this is the beginning of some of our dreams of 2004, 2006, when we wrote a proposal to get together. So this is one of those branches in life that brings us together. Decía que le agradezco mucho la presencia al doctor Benjamin Malphrus, profesor de la Universidad de Morehead, director del Space Center, y Jason Soloff, que es el ingeniero en jefe de toda la red de datos de Intuitive Machines y consultor con NASA. La verdad es una gran suerte que los tengamos acá, que empecemos este proyecto. Es interesante que han escogido, y Jack, a quien hemos escuchado con mucho entusiasmo, mucho humor y mucho entusiasmo de transmitirles a ustedes la gran aventura en la cual el mundo ya está embarcado. Estamos a la orilla del mar cósmico y esto tiene para el resto de la historia. La humanidad va a salir a poblar el universo. Nos vamos a mover por el universo, estoy seguro de eso. Por lo tanto, que estemos involucrados en este proceso, en este proyecto, realmente es interesante. Por eso es que estar con ellos dos aquí es sumamente importante. Interesante que han escogido, y Jack Fischer escogió una leyenda incaica, muy cusqueña, sobre el zorro, la luna. Hay muchas historias, muchas leyendas, variaciones de la leyenda, que nacen de el nombre de esta leyenda en el runasimi cusqueño, que dice Atoj mantawan, kuntur mantawan, kilia mantawan. El zorro, el cóndor, la luna. Y ellos han escogido eso para compenetrarse con el Perú y lograr transmitir una participación plena que estamos iniciando, espero pronto, con el Instituto Geofísico del Perú y con la infraestructura. Dos cosas importantes que necesitamos para progresar. Infraestructura, pero sobre todo capital humano. Y ya lo ha dicho Jack. Grandes enseñanzas de Alberto Giesecke desde el Instituto Geofísico del Perú, donde yo trabajé 15 años, los 15 años en el Observatorio Jicamarca, cuando recién estábamos construyendo el telescopio más grande del mundo y el mejor tensiómetro en esa época, el tensiómetro de Ñaña. Dos grandes áreas desarrolladas con personas, con capital humano, con peruanos que salieron y regresaron a trabajar en el Perú. Soy uno de ellos. Pero sobre todo, creando una infraestructura que los atraiga de regreso y los ponga de nuevo en una posición de proyectarnos al mundo. Por eso, uno de los artífices de esto, por su constancia y nuestra participación, es Ben Malphrus y dejo con la palabra al doctor Benjamin Malphrus para que empiece la charla que va a ser coprotagonizada con Jason Solow.
Just a quick note, you should never follow an astronaut speaking. So we're going to start with a little film.
It's full screen speed R5. Sorry, my translating PowerPoint into Spanish. There you are.
We're going back to the moon. We went to the moon in the late 1960s and the early 1970s. But this time we're going to go back and we're going to do it differently. We're going to stay this time. We are going to build lunar outposts. We're going to do science on the far side of the moon. We are going to do it completely differently. And the amazing thing to me is we're not going alone this time. We're going to go together as a collective species. My name is Dr. Ben Malphrus. I'm the director of the Space Science Center at Morehead State University. And this is my colleague, Jason Solow, who is the chief engineer of the Intuitive Machines Lunar Data Network that we want to describe today. And we want to describe what we envision as Peru's role, and Peru's role in helping us get back to the moon and stay there. There is a new age of space exploration. We referred to it, you may have heard to it as Space 2.0. You may have heard to it as the lunar economy. But when I used to give these speeches years ago, I would say that we're at the beginning of a new space age. Now we're in the middle of a new space age. There is so much going on. You might be familiar with the Artemis program. We just launched the first Artemis capsule unmanned the first time. Artemis 1 launched last year. It used the Space Launch System, currently the world's most powerful launch vehicle. We're going to use it to take astronauts back to the moon. We're going to use it as the workhorse to get assets to the surface of the moon. And there are other rockets as well that'll do the same thing. Two Fish, as his astronaut name he's known by, mentioned the CLIPS program. Intuitive Machines is the winner of 3 of the CLIPS programs. They have 3 missions to the moon now. First one's launching later this year. And then there's a cadence of landers. Just this one company. There are other companies going to the moon. There are other nation states going to the moon. The Chinese want to put taikonauts on the moon. NASA and other nations together will put humans again on the moon. There's an incredible amount of activity. There's Lunar Gateway, we call it. It's the orbiting International Space Station. This one's going to be different. It's going to orbit the moon in a trajectory that returns it back to Earth and back to the moon. And it'll be basically the workhorse that gets assets to the moon and to the lunar surface. So many things. Countries like Korea, Japan, the UAE, others are going to the moon. They have gone to the moon, and the cadence of lunar activity is really just increasing at an incredible rate. Our long-term goal is to build a lunar outpost to learn how to live and work in the lunar environment, because what's the ultimate goal, of course? Get to Mars. Yeah. So we got to learn how to live in the lunar environment before we do that. But we see a tremendous opportunity for Peru to join this global lunar ecosystem, and that's exactly why we're here.
So, talk a little bit about what the key pieces of a cislunar infrastructure are, and that's Jack spoke a little bit earlier about all the pieces that go together to put humans and science on orbit, and Ben hinted at some of the programs. What the global space exploration community is really doing is building the infrastructure that you need. Think about the roads and the bridges and the power lines and the communications lines that you need to move humanity off of Earth and into our solar system, right? So Earth orbit, to the moon, to Mars, to beyond, but to stay. Right? We say a lot, we're going to the moon, but this time to stay, right? So you need to build those roads and the bridges, the infrastructure, right? So what are those pieces? Well, the first one here is launch, right? We have to get off the Earth. We have to, as Jack described his launch on the Soyuz, right? We have to get to space. And so, yes, there are governments that provide these type of services. As you guys know, there are also industry, companies that are purely privately providing these services, whether it's SpaceX or Blue Origin. The Indians have a company now that's doing it. The Chinese have commercial launch, right? It's changed the model. There's a whole economy and an infrastructure developing outside of what the government's doing. Some of the young gentlemen here were asking, how do I go to space? How do I do this privately, right? Do I have to sign up and be an Air Force test pilot like my friend Jack was before I can be an astronaut? The answer is no. That's changing, right? This isn't the 1950s, 1960s, the right stuff, right? The culture and the dynamic of going to space is changing. We, ordinary people, in the next several years, it's gonna be expensive for a while, but that price will come down, right? We will be able to go without being a NASA right stuff fighter test pilot like Two Fish, right? Where he started his career, right? Ordinary folks like you and me, we'll get a chance to go.
You won't have to be Tom Cruise.
No, thank the Lord for that. Tom Cruise, I am not. I'm sorry. Many things. Although it's Mission Impossibly fun. He does fun things.
That's right.
Right? So, okay, we got up there. Transit, right? I'm on orbit. I'm in space. How do I get to the moon? It's very different. It's very challenging, right? One of the things that Jack showed, I think we have some more on this later on, is the trajectory, right? It takes our vehicles, intuitive machines, about 3.5, 4 days to get there. It's similar to Apollo, right? The reason is we launch on a high energy trajectory that basically throws us to the moon, right? And so we're on our way. The trick is we have to turn around and slam on the brakes or we're gonna whiz right by, right? So we call it a turn and burn, right? A lot of other companies, a lot of other techniques go on these very slow but low energy trajectories where they do phasing orbits and cycle their way through larger and larger and larger until they reach the moon, right? Different techniques, different approaches, right? To do that on our side, intuitive machines, we've had to develop a LOX methane, cryogenic, in-space restartable engine, the first of its kind, brand new technologies, right? It's green, right? It's methane and oxygen, fantastic. The trick was we have to be able to start it and restart it in space and make sure that works, or we can't slam on the brakes. We whiz right past the moon, on our way to Mars, but we didn't want to go there. Other techniques, these orbit phasings are much lower energy, easier trajectories. But the trade there is now you're flying in the radiation a lot more. You're swinging through the Van Allen radiation belts, your avionics, your electronics. It takes much, much more damage, right? So there's a trade to that. We're trying to understand that now. These are the types of things that undergrads, master's candidates, doctoral researchers, right? Folks from universities like these can help us understand, first of all, how to build those systems, but what are the radiation effects on these semiconductors? How do I use an off-the-shelf GPU from NVIDIA, right? Phenomenally capable chip. I can't fly it today reliably because I don't know how it will react in the radiation environment. But if I can take that type of performance that we have on our, on Ben's cell phone here, right? This is far more than we flew Apollo on. It's far more than we flew shuttle. I worked station, and if I had one of these, I wouldn't need most of the station's avionics, right? I could fly the space station with this. How do I get that to the moon and make it work? I need you guys to do that research, to come up with those ideas, right? Bring those into our teams that we can then put into space. Landing, we get down, right? So the trick about the moon is every kilogram that you put on the surface, you have to have fuel to get it there, up into orbit, get it to the moon, and then control descent. There's no atmosphere, there's no parachutes on the moon, right? So you're coming in hard, propulsive landing. Doing that landing is hard, called sticking the landing, right? And we're gonna do it automated. So at IM, we've had to develop autonomous navigation, autonomous landing systems. How do you have a robot fly with the type of precision that astronauts used to be able to do? That is computer science, that is machine learning, that is machine vision, that is advanced guidance, navigation and control theory, control systems, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, aerospace engineering, pure mathematics, right? Pure theoretical mathematics. We call them the orbit ninjas, right? Our trajectory and our guidance people, flight dynamics people that map these highways of space. It's pure theoretical math, right? This is all pure research, but we can apply it. We need your help. Surface ops, that's the fun stuff, right? That's two fish in his spacesuit bouncing around, doing the cool things, right? It's explorers, geologists, right? People who understand mining and material science. They understand that's a big thing here in Peru, right? How do you know which rock is the one that the scientists on Earth? You can bring back one rock, say a kilogram, because it's expensive to bring back mass. How do you pick the rock of that whole boulder field that when you bring it back here, a team of geologists are going to be able to understand what happened that formed the moon in that way, as if they were looking at the side of a mountain? How do you pick the rock, right? We had on Apollo some folks who were geologists. They went out, they helped pick the rock, right? That's a role. For in 10 years, 15 years from now, when we've got a permanent presence on the moon, maybe some students here from PUCP who are interested in geology. Maybe you will be that astronaut who's picking the rock to bring back to do the research, right? You're picking the most important piece of mass to come back except for you. That's a pretty cool job. And communications, we're gonna talk a lot about that, right? How do you talk? How do you move the data? It's all about the information. It's all about coordinating. You want to talk Artemis?
Yeah, love to. Artemis is near and dear to my heart. I was the principal investigator on a small satellite that was carried on the Artemis mission, Lunar Ice Cube. They weren't all completely successful, but space is hard. It's full of challenges, and when you fail, you learn and you try again. And that's how the space program has always gone. But when we go back to the moon, we're going to look more at the economic benefits. We're going to look for business models. We're going to look about, investigate how to use lunar resources and resources of asteroids. I met a professor here at PUCP the other day who studies near-Earth asteroids, some of which have trillions of dollars worth of platinum group metals. So we need to get to the point where we can utilize the resources in space. We have to develop the infrastructure, the buildings and the roads, absolutely. So for Artemis, NASA's building a global alliance. It's not just NASA, it's not just the United States. That's Artemis. There is an agreement called the Artemis Accords, and there are dozens of countries that have signed up to have a role on the Artemis missions. So we're going to use what we learn on Artemis, and then, of course, take the next giant leap to Mars. But for Artemis, we built this giant rocket, the Space Launch System. It's flown once. It'll fly twice more in the next few years. We have the Orion capsule that's been tested. The next time it flies, Artemis 2, going to launch next year, 2024-ish. and they'll have 3 astronauts. They won't quite land on the moon. They'll swing around the moon, but they'll go deeper into space than humans have ever gone before. We'll test those systems. And then Artemis 3 in about 2026, finally boots on the ground again, astronauts on the ground. And the interesting thing to me about Artemis is there have only been 12 people that have walked on the moon, all men. This time will not be the case. We'll have the first female astronaut on the moon and the first person of color on the moon. And that's actually reflected in the name Artemis. Artemis is the female sister of Apollo. So that's the origin of the name Artemis. So it's a completely different paradigm that we're really excited about. Artemis helps us build a gateway, and we've had tremendous success with the International Space Station. But it is farther to go to Sakaya from here than it is to go straight up to get to the International Space Station. So the space station is an extremely low Earth orbit, and it's a great place to learn how to operate in microgravity and how to do some of the cool experiments that Jack Fischer had described. But it's really close to the Earth. It's just hugging barely into space above the surface of the Earth. Gateway is a completely different story. Gateway will be a little bit smaller initially, version of the International Space Station, but it will go from the Earth to the Moon and back constantly in a free return trajectory, and it will allow us to carry assets, humans, landers, infrastructure to lunar orbit. Once we get to lunar orbit, then Gateway allows you to get to the surface with landers. So tremendous amount of infrastructure. One of the cool things to me about Gateway is it's placed in a really unusual orbit called near rectilinear halo orbit, which will take you really close to the surface where you can hop off with a lander and get assets to the ground. And then it moves pretty far from the moon, but it allows you to stay in a lunar orbit with a minimal amount of propellant requirement. So it almost hangs like a necklace around the moon. It's in a 1-week orbit, but that will be the primary infrastructure that allow us to get back and forth from the Earth to the moon. This is just a cutaway to go into a little bit of the detail of Gateway. You can see it has, much like the design of the International Space Station, there are human habitats. It docks with the Orion spacecraft. Ultimately, you'll be able to dock other spacecraft to it that are not built by governments, like SpaceX Dragon, ultimately. There are airlocks to allow you to have experiments and extravehicular activities outside of Gateway. And there are science experiments. So it's basically an International Space Station, but it goes to the moon. International Space Station currently, low Earth orbit, pretty cool, but Gateway's going to go to the moon constantly, there and back again. So that's an incredible piece of infrastructure.
Okay, so a couple other pieces of the infrastructure here, kind of near and dear to my heart, is our lander fleet. Right. So as you've heard, Intuitive Machines, we currently have 3 CLPS missions, the Commercial Lunar Payload Services through NASA. And just as NASA had a lot of success with SpaceX and commercial cargo delivery to ISS and commercial crew, they went for a similar model and said, well, why can't we call FedEx or UPS or DHL to deliver mass to the surface of the moon? So let's commercialize it. And so CLPS, we call it CLPS, was born. As was mentioned, there are 7 awards of CLPS contracts currently out there, and NASA's put more on the street. Intuitive Machines, out of 14 companies, we've won 3 of those 7 contracts. So we've won more contracts for these landers, these missions, than any other company out of the 14. So Nova C, the bird in the middle here, right? Nova C is actually just under 4 meters tall. This is not a small vehicle. Has that 900-pound thrust LOX methane engine. So we launch on top of a Falcon 9, throws us to the moon. Oh, sorry. We'll launch on top of a Falcon. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Comm check. All right. Anyway, so Nova C, just under 4 meters tall. So it sits perched on top of a Falcon 9. We do something kind of interesting there, is that we take the entire Falcon 9 launch vehicle and we put a ring, I'll give you a picture of it later on, called an ESPA ring, down below that has 4 additional ports. And so we had 4 independent satellites along with our lander. So when we talk about building infrastructure, we're going to talk a few slides later about building out the Lunar Relay Satellite Network, right? It becomes part of our Lunar Data Network, of which we're looking at Sakaya, that dish, to be a core piece of the ground side of that network. We deploy the satellites along with our landers, right? And so, Nova C, why Nova C? Well, Nova, new beginnings. A Nova is a new beginning, new way of doing things, new thought, new creation, right? That's Nova. Why C? Well, we designed 100 kilograms of payload to the lunar surface, C. Right? That's not enough. So Nova D gives us our 500 kilograms, and Nova M is a 1,000 kilogram class vehicle. So we're building and launching the C's right now. We've got 3 missions on that. And D and M are coming along, as I think Two Fish mentioned. We're on a team, hopefully we'll win it, to build the lunar Jeep, right, the lunar terrain vehicle, right, the human rover. If we win that, that would be delivered by a Nova M. Do the landing. So this whole fleet of tugboat, U-Haul, pickup trucks, is kind of IM's approach there. All right. Extreme lunar capabilities. So we talked a bit about, yes, ma'am? Oh, helps if I'm not muted. We good? All right, thank you.
Awesome.
So Lunar Hopper. This is a really cool piece of infrastructure. I know Two Fish mentioned it briefly. He says, yeah, we're going to have this hopper. It's going to jump off and hop into a crater, right? Let's talk about what Hopper is. Hopper is a little spacecraft, totally of its own. It's about the size of one of these office chairs, right? It has a propulsion system, a guidance system, avionics, communications. There we go. All right, we got good comm. AOS, thank you. So Hopper's about the size of an office chair or a large trash can. But Hopper is capable of, as Jack said, it's mounted on a rail on the Nova C, flies off of that rail, right? It's a rocket ship. Think of it as a drone, but there's no air. So it's our take on the Ingenuity helicopter that JPL did on Mars, but they had it easy. They have air. They could build a helicopter. No air on the moon. I need a rocket. And so Hopper is a self-contained little baby rocket. It's going to take off, and it's going to fly. It can go up to 30 kilometers away. It's going to take off and fly into a permanently shadowed region, is what NASA calls them, dark crater, a place that never sees the sun. And we believe that in those craters are volatiles, water ice being the most interesting one right now, but there may be other compounds that are in there, possibly from the formation of the solar system. So there's a lot of phenomenal, where did everything come from science to be done on that. There's also, where there's water, there's oxygen. And where there's oxygen, I can breathe. We kind of like that. We're humans, right? It helps. So I don't have to carry my oxygen or my water from the Earth to the moon. I can mine it locally, right? I'm building infrastructure. Now, I'll eventually have a gas station that's going to take that water ice and turn it into fuel. I can burn oxygen and hydrogen. I can make methane with those. I've got a LOX methane engine. Hey, how about that? I've got the ability to make methane, combust it with the oxygen, drink the water. I brought a LOX methane engine with me. Now I'm starting to get a closed ecosystem, a closed infrastructure that says I can live off the land, right? And that's the whole thing. How do I build these pieces together that we can start to live off the land? Hopper's the first look. Is there ice, right? Yes, there's wonderful science. There's wonderful geology. There's wonderful astronomy to be learned from that. But on the engineering side and the logistics side and the business case side, can I live off the land, right? Interesting stuff. Next, yep. All right. So what does that start to look like for an end-to-end cislunar system, right? So interoperable, right? Our vision intuitive machines, we're U-Haul. You guys are familiar with the U-Haul company in the States, right? You rent a truck. I need to move an apartment. I need to move a big piece of equipment. I don't have a big truck. I'll pay U-Haul, right? I'll rent the truck. That's it. We provide the truck, right? So you bring a payload. Science, engineering, operations. We've got one customer who's an artist, and he's flying a work of art to the moon because that's what he wants to do, right? We focus a lot on science, on engineering, those sorts of explorations, right? But there are people who want to do, what is the meaning to the soul of the moon? There's an artist who's doing artwork by flying something to the moon, right? That is just as valid a pursuit for humanity as is their water when this rock form, right? Just as valid. What do you want to do? What do you want to take to the moon? Is it a science experiment? Is it a piece of art? Is it a drawing that your son or daughter made, right? What do you want to send to the moon? Our job at IM is get it there and help you do it, right? Open up that infrastructure, open up that economy, right? We need team and partners to do that. So we're on there, affordable and rapid. What do we mean by affordable and rapid? Well, you don't have to buy an entire rocket to fly with this new economy, right? It's dollars or souls, right, per kilogram. You don't have to buy the entire launch vehicle and the whole mission. Just your part of it. It's fractional, right? If you have a small CubeSat, like we saw over at INRAS last night, right? Kilogram, 2 kilograms. That's cheap to fly under this mission. And you don't have to wait for an SLS Artemis 1 for NASA to go. We're going a couple times a year. Come fly with us. And we're not the only one. Other companies are doing it too. There's this whole economic ecosystem that's opening up, right? So now, if you're a PI, a scientist, and you have a great idea for something, again, you don't need a $400 or $500 million Discovery class NASA mission that you had to compete on and put together a team of universities to fly your experiment, and maybe you get selected, and maybe make it through our Congress and our budget cycles and our politics and our presidential changes, and maybe your mission launches, but maybe it doesn't, right? You have an instrument. You want to fly your instrument. That's all you want to do. You want to do your science and research. Build your instrument, work with us, we fly it. We get you your data back. That's the model. And we're not the only ones doing it. That's just, I can speak for IM, right? So, space vehicle, satellite vehicle delivery options, we can go to all kinds of different orbits. If you don't want to go to the moon, cool. Lagrange points, we'll send you there. Superlunar trajectories out to 1.3, 1.4 million kilometers on the cislunar interplanetary boundary layers. We'll take you there. We fly them ourselves on our satellites. We'll drop you off where you want to go, right? Something that we can do. And then data and control, right? We're going to bring back your data. We're going to help you command the system. We'll fly it out of our control center. We'll extend a line to you, right? Have any computer science, network engineers in here? IT people?
Yeah. Yes.
Guys, I need you. There are open job descriptions, intuitivemachines.com, no joke, right? We are hiring. As Two Fish said, thank you, sir. As Two Fish said, we have one control center currently in Houston, Nova Control. We saw some cool pictures of it. Later this summer, we're opening 2 more control centers to handle our operations, our network. I need good people. As chief engineer on the LDN, I need good people to help me build this thing out, right? The opportunities are there. Whether you're a scientist, you want to fly with us, that's great. Whether you want to be an engineer, a programmer, an operator and sit console, really cool job. Very, very fun when you get on the loops, get to sound really cool, right? Nova Control, this is Houston, right? Or maybe you're on comms in Sakai, and we'll talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Supporting mission operations, right? You'll be on console, on comms with us, right? Sakai ground, Nova Control, how copy? Nova Control Sakai, readified by. Sakai, you got a pass coming up in about 30 seconds. Let's confirm your configuration. Nova, this is Sakai, we confirm. All is green for the pass. We are ready to acquire. Copy Sakai, stand by. AOS in 17 seconds mark. It's cool, guys. It's cool, right? And it's something you can do from here on campus. Maybe we put a little Nova Control out at INRAS, and you remotely operate the Sakai dish. You finish your classes, you're interning at INRAS, right? And you're sitting console for Nova Control operating the ground station from here in Lima. Why not? Why not do that? I mean, I'll tell you, it is really freaking cool to sit console. Gets tiring night after night after night on the graveyard shifts, but it's an experience, guys. Anyway, Ben, hit the button. I'm pontificating here.
Yeah.
Sorry. All right, let's talk what's called LunaNet, right? So this is what we're building. LunaNet is what NASA calls the International Lunar Network, right? So this is NASA's version of it. ESA has established something they call Moonlight. This is all you guys can go on, Google LunaNet, you'll see this picture, right? This is what the international space community envisions for data networking. So these are the links, direct to Earth links to ground stations. Here's the frequencies. We talk about S-band, X-band, Ka-band. Why do we talk about those? That's what the international community under the ITU has agreed that we use for these communications. We have proximity links from lunar orbit for our relays down to human and robotic systems here. Cross links between the two of them, right? Navigation links. There's something that I saw this week here at PUCP, and it's phenomenal, guys. The earthquake alerting system that you have developed, that will save millions of lives. Don't sell that short. That's huge. What you guys showed us. We walked out of the lab last night going, yeah, they've done some awesome stuff. Like, the control's great, but my God, that earthquake system will save lives, right? It's amazing. We need, we call it LUNASAR, Lunar Search and Rescue. What do you do when an astronaut has a problem on the surface of the moon? Right? Now we've got political science problems. How do you coordinate between the Chinese, the Russians, the Japanese, the Americans, the British, the Peruvians, the Chileans, everybody who's up there doing stuff? Who gets called for search and rescue? How do you coordinate it? Do the Chinese have to stop what they're doing to go help an American astronaut? I don't know. Does the international law of the sea apply in space? I don't know. Interesting legal and political science questions. Someone's got to solve those questions, right? I'm an engineer. I got to get the comms out and make sure someone can respond, right? What does lunar search and rescue look like? What does space weather alert look like, right? You see a solar flare on the sun, you got 8 minutes until that hard radiation is going to hit the surface of the moon, if it's coming in direct. It's a little longer because it kind of winds its way around. But you got 8 minutes to warn the crew to get to shelter if they're on the surface or they're dead. How do you get that alert to them in time? Right? We're trying to answer that question. We don't know yet. We got lucky with Apollo, very lucky. If we're there to stay, how do we do it right? How do you put these alert systems in? You guys have started to think it through with what I saw with the earthquake and the tsunami alert systems, right? You're at least thinking through that problem. That's knowledge you can apply directly out of your research. We as an international community need to solve it. All right, what does data relay look like? So we talked a bit about this. So there are satellites. This is Con 1. This is Con 2. All right, Star Trek fans? All right, Star Trek 2. All right, the best movie of the set, yes? Right? When I first heard we were naming our vehicles Cons, I thought Ricardo Montalban, right? Con! Yeah, I was really disappointed. It's very, very sad. Con, K-H-O-N, is what we've named our satellites. It's an ancient Egyptian god of the moon, means traveler. Right, so that's where it came from. I was really, really disappointed. I want a picture of Ricardo Montalban up on the launch vehicle, but we're going with it. So our birds are the Cons. We build the constellation of our fleet. And we've got different geometries here. We've got Lagrange orbiters. So near side between L1 is a gravitational balance point between the moon and the Earth. On the far side, L2, there's another one that covers the far side. So you get geometry and visibility there. And we have a series of highly elliptical birds targeting the South Pole. You build this up, you get coverage, obviously. You get 4 of them up there that can see something, and now I've got effectively GPS. There's no navigation. There's no GPS on the moon today, guys. We got to build it, right? To tie that back, though, this satellite, and something Ben keeps reminding me, this satellite, if it is your GPS position datum point, that's your reference. You can get a signal from that. Those of you guys who are familiar with how GPS works, you measure the time of arrival, right? You look at it, you back it, figure out where it was, how far away was it, take a couple of those, triangulate, there's your position, right? On the ground, we're good to 10 meters, right, or so, driving around, whatever it is. Google Maps tells me to make my turn, I miss it. That's life. Up there, this is your datum, this little ball of metal floating around. Where is it? If it's off by a couple of meters, your solution for your position is off by those couple of meters, amplified by the errors, right? So how do I get the knowledge and position of that down to better than a meter and velocities to better than 1 millimeter per second? So the max running speed of an angry slug pretty much is about 1 millimeter per second, right? Thank you, Ben, for the slug analogy. I do that with ground stations. Good signals and incredibly precise timing references at ground stations, like Sakaya, right? I have to nail my position of my satellite using radiometric tracking, range and Doppler from an Earth-based ground station. The ground stations are network. I mean, the satellites are sexy. They're cool. Everybody likes space stuff, things that fly, right? They're anchored by the ground stations. If I don't have good ground stations, that's meaningless. It's buzzing around, but I can't use it for nav. I can barely use it for comm. I need Sakaya. When Jack showed the northern-southern hemisphere thing, yes, to get coverage. I also need northern points and southern points to get the good triangulation, get my geometries to nail my orbital determination, my position, right? I need a southern hemisphere station in the Americas. You know someone might have one? I'm looking around. I've heard there's one over the hills over there. Yeah, might happen to have one of those in your back pocket. We need Sakaya, something like it, right? Yep. It really fills the need. All right, I'm gonna do a couple more of these and then I'm gonna hand it back over to Ben. What does the network look like, right? There's no Sakaya on here because I don't have one yet. I've got this little commercial station in Kourou that I'd rather not use. I'd rather have a station right about here, I think. You know, it looks like a good spot, just about perfect. Right? But you've got the converts flying around in orbit. This is really to show our concept of operations. We were talking about the LTV. So I've got a lunar terrain vehicle, one of our landed assets. All have direct-to-Earth communications to our various network stations. This is a lunar data network, right? At S, X, and Ka band, whether it's telemetry, tracking, high mission data rate, doing the radiometrics or the ranges. These letters, CCSDS, Consultative Committee on Space Data Systems, this is what happens when you let the international community name things by agreement, right? Basically, it's a group of international spacefaring organizations that agree on how we're going to do things, right, for data standards. IP and DTN, disruption-tolerant networking. How do you talk when you don't have a connection? All the rules of the internet, right? It's richly connected. I can trust routers. If you're on the network, you're supposed to be there. If I can talk to you, you can talk to me, right? We're not mobile. All those assumptions that went into the internet and TCP IP, they all fail when you're in space. So DTN looks at addressing that. Tons of computer science research in that. We're just starting to build this out of the laboratory into flight, right? Huge opportunities there. Anyway, so multiple links, they're all routed, doing all kinds of cool stuff. This is when everybody is in view. Pop it. What if I'm not in view? Now I've got a lander on the far side. Why are relays important? Well, now I can come around, I can turn the corner to a relay bird and still come down and still communicate. Half of the moon is on the far side. I can't talk to it. It's tidally locked. I can't talk to it ever. That side never faces the Earth. Guess where the only radio quiet place in the universe is? You wanted to do measurements down at 10 to 80 megahertz? There is no EMI or RFI on the far side of the moon. It's called the shielded zone of the moon. Radio quiet, beautiful place for a radio telescope. I've heard some folks around here know a little bit about radio telescopes, right? NASA wants to build, and the international community wants to build radio instruments on the far side of the moon at low frequencies because I can't put them on Earth and have them work effectively. It's too noisy. The SZM, the shielded zone, is protected, which means I need to communicate around the corner, so now I need a lunar data network. But the science on the far side is amazing. It is the only place in the universe that is radio quiet, at least from us. Next. And then crosslinks, right? Well, what if my satellite that's doing the relay can't also see Earth too? We have a crosslink. The satellites themselves are network routers, right? DTN fabric, cool things like that. So these are all kind of the puzzles we need to go solve, guys. So with that, I will hand it back to my friend Ben.
Very good.
We'll talk about how we're going to use Sakai.
Thank you.
If you want a laser, you got it.
All right, excellent. So part of the Lunar Data Network is the ground network that Jason mentioned. With all these missions to the moon coming up this year, next year, all these landers, there's a need for continuous communications. And you've seen the overall architecture with the lunar orbiters coming, the lunar assets, but the ground network that we have to create, you can't just go and use 5-meter dishes or 10-meter dishes or barely even 20-meter dishes. You need extremely large apertures on the ground. When energy comes from the moon from a satellite that may be transmitting, say, 4 watts, the energy that you receive on the Earth is maybe a 10 trillionth of a watt. So you need a giant aperture. You need extraordinarily sensitive receiver systems. You have to cryogenically cool your low noise amplifiers. And then going the other way, you need kilowatts of power because the power dissipates over as a function of the square of the distance. So you lose power the farther out you go. It goes both ways, right? So I have to pump kilowatts of power out to get watts of power or even milliwatts of power at the moon for my commands. And then the cool thing for me is ranging. So with no GPS, you want to figure out where things are. You send a signal from the ground station to the spacecraft transpons it, turns it back around, and you use an incredibly precise time standard. We use hydrogen masers because other atomic clocks, believe it or not, are not good enough. One time standard in the world that works for precision ranging, and that's hydrogen masers. And we intend to put a hydrogen maser here in Sakaya, which ultimately you could use as a national time standard. Could be a national facility, the one instrument alone. But for continuous coverage, we're working through this lunar data network, but we have a gap. And having the Peruvian dish will complete the LDN, the lunar data network, and it closes the gap that we right now have in South America and the Pacific region for navigation. So here are the existing dishes, some of them, in the Lunar Data Network. One in Australia, one in England, about the same size as the Sakaya dish, a little bit smaller one at Okinawa, and I'm a little bit sad to say that our dish in Kentucky is a bit smaller than the Sakaya dish. And aperture is everything for these kind of systems. So 32 meter is a world-class antenna system. There are few dishes of that size left in the entire world. And you have one here in Peru. It's an extraordinary asset. So once we outfit it with modern technology, it'll be literally a state-of-the-art. It will be certainly the best instrument in South America and one of the best instruments in the entire world. So you can see right there with the circle, we've shown this versions of this graph a couple of times because without the red circle there, we have a significant gap in our coverage. I'll let Jason talk to this slide.
Sorry, guys. Unleash the engineer, right?
Jason gets the hard one.
So this is actually a chart that's got a lot of life in presentations, in my architecture work, as we define our programs and our vision at IM. I'm going to use this and talk to opportunities. So this is a look at a network and an avionics stack. So boxes and protocols and applications and things like that. For these guys who do computer science or avionics work, you've seen stuff like this, right? Protocol stacks, whether it's the ISO layer or the CCSDS layer, whatever. I'm going to talk about this in terms of what skill sets do I need on my team? Who do I need to hire? Who do I need to partner with? Who do I need experienced professors to teach and to train to come join our team and do these things? So on the left, Nova Control, really cool place, right? A lot of fun. I need ops. I need operators. I need people who are going to know the systems inside and out, who can be on net, who can work as part of an operations team in real time, solve problems, right? And know those systems to the point that they know how to diagnose, debug, fix it on the fly, right? That's a cool thing. It's a special skill set. We need operators, right? These boxes over here on the left, terrestrial network interface, right? Out of Nova Control Houston, we go across the internet. We use Amazon Web Services. We use Azure, Microsoft Azure Cloud Services, right? I need computer science and IT type of people who can help me build out the servers and the firewalls and the protocols and all the goodness that goes into virtual machining or virtual machines and virtualized infrastructure and all of that stuff, right? I don't need to build a back-end e-commerce platform. Not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for ChatGPT. I'm not looking for any of that stuff, right? I need someone who can build, honest to God, it's got to work and be reliable and know you can't three-finger salute it and Control-Alt-Delete the thing when it goes down. Reliable, virtualized infrastructure. And it's got to work the first time, every time. And oh, by the way, have 3 more fail downs for fault tolerance. It's a different way of thinking about it. But it's virtualizing critical infrastructure. You do it with us, now that's applicable to power, to medicine, to first responders, all kinds of other industries. Leverage off of this stuff. In Houston, we got a lot of petrochem. We have a lot of chemical plants. Right? It's one of the things Houston does. Right? Big energy area of the United States, energy capital of the US. We found that the skills that we do in mission operations at Johnson Space Center and at Nova Control We can go to the plants, and we can take operators out of the plants, and some of these systems thinkers out of the plants, and we can train them in space, and they can transfer that. Vice versa, unfortunately, when we train up an operator, we train up a systems thinker in space, whether they're at NASA Johnson or Nova Control, these companies like Halliburton, ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, they come along with big job offers. And suddenly our operators take those skills out of aerospace and into energy. These are transferable skills, right? You know how to think. You know how to solve problems, right? Anyway, I need that here in the terrestrial networks. So now we got to LTN site, Lunar Tracking Network. We call it Lunar Data Network now, LDN. So the baseband unit. Two Fish talked about the avionics. He's an astronaut. Everything's avionics, right? It's on the ground. It doesn't aviate. It's a box. But it's a piece of equipment that sits under the dish. That could be Sakaya, right? What's living in there is RF. What's living in there is receivers, transmitters, high power amplifiers, filters, the things you see in your EE classes, right? It's analog, it's digital, right? It's antenna designs, electromagnetic theory, physics, math, where we talk about the DSP in the receivers, forward error correction coding, right? Modulation, all that kind of stuff. The things that you're seeing in Marco's EE classes and DSP classes, these are the things I need in my team to help me build, because I'm going to put one of these under Sakaya. I call it BBU 2.0, and then that's going to put all of our other ground stations. I need help with that today, right? Anyway, so we build that box, put it underneath there. There's the BBU hardware, right? So we got the network management, all that cool stuff we saw last night at INRAS, that guidance and control system. That's the stuff up top, network management, ground station data storage, packetization, transport layer, link scheduling, the BBU hardware, right? Maybe you're not a software person, maybe you like hardware. I need someone to build hardware to turn those ideas, those protocols, that software into actual signals. At the end of the day, there's got to be electrons that flow, right? We need to move the electrons. That's this green box. Finally, the ground station. This is Sakaya. This is the big dish. This is the steel. This is mechanical engineering. This is structural engineering. This is industrial engineering. This is operations and maintenance. This, frankly, is vocational, technical level for some folks. These are mechanical techs. These are mechanics who aren't afraid to go climb a 30-meter antenna, which we did the other day, and actually refill the oil. I mean, you don't have to be a PhD to work on these antennas. There are roles for everybody in this industry. You know, actually just maintain the antenna. It's kind of a fun job if you're not afraid of heights.
Not for me.
Not for Ben. Not for Ben. He'll stay on the ground. But this is maintaining Sakaya, and we're envisioning there is a local team, obviously here. Maybe it's probably PUCP. Maybe it's probably you guys partner with some other more vocational programs, technician training programs. You know where to find these people in Peru. It's a local team. We're not going to come down out of Houston every time we need to touch the dish. We need a local team living here in Peru maintaining these assets, whether it's the control center or whether it's the dish. So now we're on the RF, right? We're going up to the relay bird. This is pure physics. This is pure math. This is electromagnetics. This is ionospheric propagation. This is scintillation. This is phase shifting and phase group delay as the RF transits the ionosphere. This is meteorology. Water vapor is terrible for Ka band. We were talking about putting a water vapor radiometer at the antenna. That's pure science, guys. That is good, fundamental climate research, meteorological ionospheric research. It's also operationally required to do this stuff. So now the things I need to do my engineering and my operations is going to give us some science too. Good science, right? I need to understand that water vapor column. I need to understand the ionospheric conditions. I need to understand how the plasmas, we were talking last night, how are the plasmas moving through the time of day? That changes my propagation. That changes my link. That changes my link margin. That changes how much data I can move through. All kinds of things. It introduces errors in my Doppler and my range, right? Millimeters of error, degrees of error in phase going through the atmosphere translates to meters of error at the moon in my measurement, because it's all noise. Now my relay satellite's in the wrong place, or it's not where it thought it was, and now the quote GPS signal you're getting from the moon, it thinks it's telling you the truth, and it is as it understands it, but now you're off by 100 meters in your rover, and what you thought was driving on a clear track, you just fell into a crater. Or your robot did, that's trying to make decisions on autonomous navigation. We need to understand the ionosphere. You guys are good at that. Help me. Going back at the stack, now we're in spacecraft communications, right? You guys have got some experience with that. There's the satellites you've built. A little bit different. It's got to work in vacuum. It's got to work in radiation. It's got to be super low mass, super low power. It's a little bit of a different skill set. It's fun. How do you test it? How do you build it? You guys show me. You build a vacuum chamber. You build a shake and, we can call them shake and break, right? A shake table, vibration testing, right? You're doing it all here. I need that in my team. Whether it's in Houston or here in Peru, I need that in my team. Avionics communications, flight radios, software-defined radios, network routers in space, transmitters, receivers, all these things. Whether you're doing it for IM or you're doing it for a company like Innoflight or Cesium Astra, right? Companies that make these boxes. Guys, the whole industry is growing up around this. It's no longer the big three aerospace companies. Why can't Peru have an avionics company? We've heard talk about the idea of a spaceport Peru, right? It's not just launch. Spaceport is about an ecosystem, right? It's the companies that build the technology, build the hardware, test it, provide all of those services. It's an entire industry, sir. That is where, just from the United States, Two Fish talked about the $90 billion in the next couple of years. That's where the fraction of that comes in and changes communities. Totally. Careers for thousands, good careers. So now we're flying. Command data handling, software, again, this is on the flight computers, right? Kind of cool stuff, but it's got to work. First time, every time. So it's a little different. Again, you can't, yes, you can send a patch up, but you really don't want to crash your flight computer. Not good, right? It's a little bit different. And now we're coming back down the stack, back up the stack to the landers. Each of these things to the system's got a different role. If you walk your way through it, I know a lot of the folks in here, right? Engineering students, engineering, computer science, technical disciplines, physics, math. Okay, about half.
Yeah.
About half, right? Law? Show of hands. Lawyers.
Yes.
Lawyers. Okay. We need you. Sir, it pains me as an engineer to say so, but we need you. Help us settle some of these questions. What happens when when company A's data is moving through Intuitive Machines network and it gets hacked by somebody else in cislunar space? Where was the crime committed? Who has jurisdiction? Where's the liability? Who's responsible? Right? We talked about the law of the sea. Right? It used to be the Royal Navy kind of enforced admiralty law, right, for piracy and rights and all that stuff. What's the law on the moon? Someone builds a mine on the moon, they set it up, it's automated, it goes. Another country comes along, or some shifty company like Intuitive Machines. That's a nice mine there. You got something good going on. It'd be a shame if anything happened to that, wouldn't it? Be a damn shame. I'll watch that for you. Or maybe I'll just take what you got. I could use some of those resources. What's the law? Right? So we talk about things like space. We need space lawyers.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Political science. Show of hands. Any poli-sci? Okay. We got a poli-sci. We just had a conversation yesterday about between companies and governmental organizations and academic organizations. How does that dynamic work? What does the law say? How do we achieve things where the state has a role and companies have a role and nonprofit and academics have a role? Political science question. Around space? Really? That's weird, isn't it? Right? Education, teachers. We have teachers.
Yeah.
We have teachers. How do you pass the dream to the next generation? I'm mid-career. I got another 20 years of doing this. I'm going to retire. I'm going to die. Right? You guys got a little bit longer run than me, but it'll happen. Right? Who passes on that dream to the next generation? How do you do it? How do educators get involved? How do you teach the next generation? Right? You have a role. And this chart is engineering focused, but you just start thinking about what has to go in to do this, and I'm sorry if I'm talking long. It's important to me. But that's what I want to leave you with. And I think we're kind of closing up here. Yeah, we got some consortium conversation.
Yeah.
The thing I really want you to take out of here, and it's something I learned this week, my first trip to Peru, right? I am so impressed with this country. I am so impressed with the capability that I saw. And Ben's talked it up, but it's different from hearing it from Ben and actually seeing it and meeting the people. I am so thankful for the welcome I've received, how gracious, how welcoming everybody I've met here is. Whether it's the person on the street, whether it's the waiter at the restaurant, whether it's your faculty here, whether it's been the government folks, the culture here is amazing. The hospitality, the attitude of people here is wonderful. And I see technical depth, right? You guys are doing some phenomenal things with no money. We talked about it with no money. Aldo goes, yep, we got no money. I mean, when you were talking about the proposal for the radiometer you're looking at, you told me what it was going to cost to build 256 antennas, like, you're missing a zero, right? What you guys are achieving, just on grit and get it done, it's very Texas of you. Get her done, right? I love it, right? And then the students I've met, the professionals I've met, there's so much depth, experience, expertise, drive here. I mean, again, Ben told me about it. I got to see it this week. So I want to leave you guys with, I know Ben's going to wrap us up here, is, we talk a lot, and forgive me for it, about NASA and the United States exploration, right? NASA's going to go do this thing. We had a really great video, right? I don't know what they spent on the video. Probably more than it costs for you to build your radiometer, right? But Peru, if you want to be part of this exploration, you have everything that you need to be a leader in this. You've got the people, you've got the culture, you've got the technical depth. It sounds like my conversations with your government, you've got the ministerial support, and that's 90% of the fight probably right there. If Peru wants to be a leader in international space exploration, you guys have everything that you need to do it, right? The students here, I heard you ask Jack, Two Fish, and Two Fish is his call sign when he was a test pilot, a fighter pilot. So that was his, Maverick, Goose, Top Gun. Jack was Two Fish. There were two Fishers, is the way it works, right? There was a Fisher already in the squadron. Jack was the second Fisher. Dr. Seuss, one fish, two fish. Anyway, it's not as cool a story as some people's call signs. But Two Fish, my buddy Two Fish. He was asking, answering questions, and people rightly, they always ask, "Hey, what's it like to be an astronaut?" Right? Well, you got to poop. Pooping is hard. Jack tells it like it is, right? But there were questions of, how do I go? How do I fly? Right? Guys, it's open to you. Might be a few years, but that's okay. You can pay the bucks and go with Axiom, commercial flight if you want. Sure. SpaceX is going to start flying people on their own. Axiom's flying them. Blue Origin's going to fly them. William Shatner went up. He didn't really actually make orbit. He didn't actually make it to the astronaut line. Don't tell him. They didn't make the common line. You can do that. You can be a tourist. Or you can work with CONITA, and you can build a Peruvian space program. And you can fly Peruvian astronauts. Maybe from a Peruvian spaceport on a Peruvian launch vehicle. Flying, of course, on Intuitive Machines' Lunar Data Network, which happens to be anchored on a Peruvian 32-meter antenna in Sakaya. Right? Why not? Why not, guys? So I just want to leave you with that dream. Maybe it hits you, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you do something great with us in space. Maybe you cheer from the sidelines and you celebrate all humanity as we go. They're both valid. That's fine. But just know, from what I saw this week, you guys have the right stuff. You got all the pieces. Nice. Just grab it, run with it, and build the dream, guys. Ben?
Beautifully said. So, So just a couple of final thoughts. Where do we go from here? How do we go back to the moon together? We're trying to put a consortium together of some of the major players in Peru and in the United States to, first of all, help upgrade Sakaya. That's the first step. There are other steps. We have PCP, which flew the very first Peruvian satellite. I've seen it in the CONITA, the model, in the CONITA offices. First satellite ever built, ever flown, built here at PCP in Peru. Intuitive Machines, of course, a major partner. IGP has extraordinary technical expertise. They have the antenna. We're looking at agreements in terms of how to access and manage. CONITA has extraordinary skills. They have a satellite in low Earth orbit right now that they're operating from 50 kilometers from here. Of course, my university in Kentucky, we also have the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the Deep Space Network, who's helping design some of the elements of the dish, and CACI, another company that's a worldwide company that helps bring customers in. So running out of time here, so I'm going to just say one last thing quickly about the Sakai station. It's a gorgeous station, strategically located. It's in phenomenal shape. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's worth seeing. It's an extraordinary instrument. But we plan to upgrade it and bring it to literally a state-of-the-art antenna system. There's a lot of work to be done. We have to upgrade the feed systems, the digital signal processing systems. A lot of infrastructure has to be upgraded, but it's all there. It has the capability for these upgrades. So we have a long way to go, but we're working through a plan, a proof of concept, trying to look at a timeline for the upgrades. How do we train you guys to help develop, upgrade, and operate it? We need training activities. We're going to evolve the technology as we go, but we do this through the right partners, the right condors. And then finally, we're not going to use it 24/7 just for satellite data services from the moon. It has the capability to be an incredible radio telescope. So it's a beam waveguide system. So what we can do is give radio astronomers and other astrophysicists in Peru access to time on the dish. They can bring in their own radiometer systems, their own square law detectors, and there are some great work in astrophysics that goes on here at PCP already. In fact, I'm on one Javier's doctoral thesis right now, who's doing interferometry work. So we envision a time allocation on this dish for Peruvian astronomers to have access to do whatever science they prefer to do. And then here's the really cool thing for me. There's a tie actually back to the IGP and the research that IGP does in geodetic research and geophysics. Because we have an incredible time standard, this hydrogen maser, we can connect the Sakaya dish with another dish in the world, anywhere in the world, and make literally an antenna the size of the planet Earth as an interferometer system. And with that, you can look at a single quasar, for example. You can measure crustal dynamics, plate tectonics. You can provide data that goes into earthquake modeling. It could be a tremendous instrument for VLBI, very long baseline interferometry research, to fold in geophysics research. So we're really excited about that. So to wrap it up, and I apologize if we've gone a little long, but Jason and I are very excited about being here. It's a new era. It's a new space age. And we're right in the middle of it. And there are tremendous opportunities for you guys to be not only involved in it, but to help lead it, to help invent it as we go. You guys have a rare asset here, but the most incredible asset is sitting in the audience here. It's the scientists, the engineers, the technicians, the attorneys, the politicians of the future. And that's what we need to work together, the right team for the Condor, for the Fox to get back to the moon. So I'll end with that. Thank you. If you don't mind, we'll take a couple of questions. You have to leave, we certainly understand, but we'd love to try and entertain a couple of questions. Here's one right here. And I'm going to give Jason the hard ones.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I study computer science, so my question is, what do you think will be the impact of AI in the community?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. The impact of AI on space infrastructure. I'll give a brief answer, and I'll let Jason give a little bit more information. One use of AI in space missions is related to spacecraft autonomy. So right now, until we build out this lunar tracking network, the lunar data network, you can't always talk to your spacecraft. And even, for example, rovers on Mars, you can't have direct conversation. The relay time is too long. So there are times when you don't have direct contact with your spacecraft. The spacecraft is going to have to monitor its own condition, monitor its own state of health. It's going to have to make some independent decisions. It can do that effectively through machine learning and through invoking AI algorithms. It can predict failures and take measures to avoid those failures. The spacecraft are going to have to be smart to live in this extraordinarily harsh environment. And AI, I think, is going to play a tremendous role.
I agree very much with what Ben said. I think autonomy is the first use. For us, would be the obvious use. The technique, the areas what we call fault detection, isolation, and recovery, FITR. Right? It's the spacecraft knowing what a normal day looks like and knowing when it's not having a normal day, figuring out what's gone wrong, and fixing it before your ground controller even knows that there's a problem, because sometimes you don't have the time, right? So FITR, autonomy, autonomous mission planning is your next thing, right? I'm going to have things driving. In fact, IM-1, we've got rovers, right, our first lander. They're going to drive. It would be so much easier for me to tell the rover, okay, you just got off my ship here. In a day and a half, I need you 50 kilometers over here to take a measurement. Rover, you figure it out, right? Self-driving cars, Lord help us, please don't let it be a Tesla, but self-driving cars on the moon, right? Because a lot of the cost in space operations is planning, right? With the JPL folks, they plan out every drive of those rovers, every second of the day, every rotation of the wheel. It's all scripted. Upload the script. Hope it followed the script and nothing went wrong, right? That's why Ingenuity was so cool. It had to go fly and deal with real-time changes like wind. We need that autonomy. That's where AI comes in. When the crew is going to be operating, you're not going to have, I like to think in terms of submarine, right? A starship looks a lot like a submarine. It's out of communications, right? You've got a command, you've got engineers, you've got operations, you've got everything, right? I think of the submarine model. But you're going to start off with 3-4 people. Well, maybe an autonomous system, an AI, with a large language model can help that crew work through things, right? Let's hope it doesn't turn into HAL from 2001. Large language model went bad, but those types of things I think play a big role. A challenge to you as a computer scientist, right? And what year are you? Yeah, what year? Junior, senior? Okay. So a challenge to you is let's get the capability that we have in AI today, and it's coming along, but run it on a cell phone, not 1,000 GPUs on a cloud, right? Now there is some computer science theory, new algorithms, new processing techniques, new research. Find a way to do that, right? And now let's see where the tool goes. Very good question.
Hi.
Okay.
Hello.
Sorry.
Can I ask you one more question, please? I'm here.
Last question, okay.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that this was a really awesome presentation, talking about the entire presentation. It was funny, it was interesting, and we have learned something new. And I think that's the mission of the professors and also the assistant professors here in the university. Ben, I would like to hear your opinion regarding the antenna. As a professor of space science, as a director of the Space Science Center at Morehead State University, and also as the project director of the design and construction of a 21-meter dish antenna at Morehead State, I would like to hear your opinion about the importance of having this type of antennas here in the South Hemisphere, specifically in Peru. Is this kind of projects profitable for a university? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer is that you have a strategic location, you have an incredible asset, but the most important thing I think you have is the talent. To upgrade these dishes, if you're tracking satellites in low Earth orbit, it's difficult. But if you're tracking satellites at lunar distances, it's extraordinarily challenging. So we upgraded the dish in Kentucky from a LEO tracking station to a deep space station, and it took years, and it was extraordinarily challenging. I know what you guys can do here. I've worked with you guys. I've worked with you, Niels. I've seen your students, and your staff, your faculty are all extraordinarily capable. So with a strategic location, with the infrastructure that you have and that we can build together, but most of all, with the talent that you guys have, we can overcome those challenges. We've done it before. I believe that you guys can do it here, and we really want to be here to help you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Un applause. Bueno, hemos llegado al final de nuestra conferencia. Solo un mensaje final. Esta es una oportunidad, decimos, para el Perú, es una oportunidad para las instituciones que van a participar de este proyecto. Pero en realidad es una oportunidad para cada una de las personas que están sentadas en este auditorio. Cada uno de ustedes puede hacer de este proyecto su futuro de vida. Y de repente la próxima vez nos encontramos en la Luna. Nos vemos en la Luna en el futuro.